Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at Texas A&M. And joining us on the channel to talk a little bit more about the Aggies is Carter Carls. Carter, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me, Connor. Appreciate it, man.
Well, before we get into the position groups here for the Aggies, Carter, please tell our viewers and subscribers where they can find your content.
Gig'em247.com at 247 Sports. And then at Carter Carls, first name, last name on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, looking at the Aggies for this coming season, a lot of returning production for Texas A&M. They do have a couple of position groups that lose some of their top players from last year, but we'll start on the offensive side of the football, and we'll start at quarterback. So I guess this is going to be the Marcel Reed show, and we'll see, I guess, his room for growth ultimately looks like on the field this fall.
Yeah, it's the Marcel Reed show. You're right. It for the first time ever, right? Like last offseason, we all thought it would be the Connor Wigman show, and really last season was it going to be Connor? Is it going to be Marcel? Well, they ended up rolling with Marcel, and he definitely showed flashes, but he still has a lot to prove, I think, going into this year, being his first year as a full-time starter. And I think he's going to be set up fairly well when you look at the offense around him, and we'll get into that when we go into some of the other position groups. But I think for him, the focus might not be, hey, uh, this guy's going to put up 400 yards passing every game, or this guy's got to put the team on his back. I think it's just he needs to continue to not lose games for A&M, and that's what he did last year. He did not lose games for A&M, took care of the football. Had about a 62% completion percentage. I bet you he'll bump that up to 65, 66 this year. And just be an efficient player when you have the offensive line that you have coming back, when you have the running game that I think A&M will have. You don't have to be a superstar. And so I think that's kind of the focus for him. But obviously, you would like him to make that next step as a passer. And I think that might be the biggest question is, can he be, that downfield passer? When you look at the deep ball numbers, they weren't great for him last year, but it was a pretty small sample size, and he very well could have a better receiving core this year. And obviously, another year of experience, another year in Colin Klein's system. So a lot to like, but still a lot to prove for Marcel Reed.
And you briefly talked about what the running game could be this fall. So PFF just came out with their rankings of the top offensive lines in college football. They had Texas A&M third there. I think there's six guys that returned that had at least 300 snaps last year or so. Maybe five guys there, but and they also have arguably the best returning offensive guard in the country and Reed Adams. So Carter, take us through this offensive line. This seems like a really deep group.
Yeah, it's deep. You got seven guys who have significant experience, and you have three spots that I think you feel extremely strong about. Left tackle with Trey Zune. This will be his fourth year as a starter at left tackle, and is somebody that very well could have been drafted in this previous draft, probably in the later rounds, but still would have been drafted and definitely could be a higher pick next year. You got left guard Chase Bisanis, who is probably the most athletic freak among the group. Like he's the guy that's going to put up the weight room numbers and is going to really impress NFL scouts whenever he decides to go to the draft. This will be his third year as a starter, and is somebody that when you pair him next to Trey Zune, uh, that's pretty strong to have on your left side of the offensive line. So another guy that I think will be a draft pick. And then, as you said, maybe the highest draft pick of the group is Reed Adams, who really broke out last year after he transferred in from Kansas. A bigger guy, and certainly I think is somebody that could be that first team, second team All SEC kind of right guard for you this season. And then the two question marks are probably center and right tackle. But at the same time, it's kind of nitpicking because I still think A&M feels pretty good about those spots because you got Mark Naboo, who's coming off a pretty significant injury, but he'll have, he suffered that in the first game last year, and he'll be good to go and participated in the spring as well. And you got Coley Fayu, who kind of took over that job after Naboo went down. And those are both guys that, are they going to be all SEC players this year? I don't know. Are they going to be draft picks? I don't know. But I think they're good centers, right? And to have two of them is good. And then right tackle, you got Demetrius Crownover kind of leading the group. Uh, this will be his second season as a full-time starter, but really his third season as a starter overall. He's a former tight end that developed into a right tackle. It kind of took him some time before he really was entrenched in that spot, but I think he's somebody that probably needs to answer the most questions coming into this year. And you've got Ruben Fothery behind him, who's got a lot of experience as well. So that's certainly going to be a battle, but I do think, hey, it's your third year as a full-time starter, and you're going to be surrounded by a group that has hundreds of combined starts and games appeared in. And, what do we know about offensive lines? They really gel when they have that continuity and that experience. And I just think this group, the sky's the limit with them. And if you were to tell me that they were a finalist for the Joe Moore Award at the end of the season, top three, top five offensive line, I would not be shocked at all.
So this is the best Aggie offensive line since the COVID year, I presume.
100%. But hey, I'll say it won't take much to do that because the 2022 and 23 offensive lines were really bad. So, like they had a kind of a bad stretch there, but certainly, yeah, that 2020 group was a top three finalist for the Joe Moore Award. And, Mike Elko earlier this week said that, and he was the defensive coordinator at the time. He said, hey, this group this year compares to that group. And that might be a big expectation to put on them, but it would not be a shock if they were, in that same ballpark as that group.
I mean, when you combine the returning experience that you discussed, and the fact that there might be one or two guys that are going to be listed on potentially Bruce Feldman's freaks list that he puts out, I think in July or August. I mean, this is a high ceiling group, no doubt. Do they feel pretty good about the two deep as well, like with 8, 9, 10 of these guys?
Yeah, I think I don't know if any college team feels good about number 8, 9, and 10, but A&M feels good about 1 through 7, and that's kind of what matters right now. But I do think there are guys coming up the ranks, whether it's Robert Borden at left tackle or Ashton Funk, who can play a number of different positions. And then you've got even from this incoming freshman class, Lamont Rogers will be a true freshman, probably more of a fit at right tackle, and he certainly has a lot to develop physically. He's got to shed some weight and kind of uh, put in some work in the weight room. But I think they feel good about the present and the future. But it's going to be hard to ever replicate an offensive line like this, where you have so much starting experience, you have so much continuity. So yeah, if they have an injury, I think 1 through 7, it's like, hey, we've seen all of these guys play a lot of snaps. We feel good about them. After that, you never quite know until you put them out there. But I do think they like some of those guys coming up the ranks. And by the time this offensive line is done here, those guys coming up the ranks will be sophomores, juniors, and there will be some natural, passing of the torch there.
So, how good do you ultimately think this running game will be for Texas A&M, given Reed's ability uh, to move on with the ground game, and then with the running backs that return?
Yeah, I mean, I think it very well could be top 10 in the country running game. You look last year before Le'Veon Moss got hurt, they were like 10th in the nation in rushing yards per game, and in a lot of different categories they were top 10, top 15. rushing offense. And that was, not that was with like half the games with Marcel Reed being the quarterback. And so, Marcel Reed's going to get you 50, 60 rushing yards a game, maybe. I don't know. And then you're going to have Le'Veon Moss. But, it's not just Le'Veon Moss. You've got Amari Daniels, as you mentioned, but you also have Reuben Owens, the former five-star recruit who, hasn't quite, lived up to the hype, but there's reason for that. True freshman, what are you going to get? Like, he played a lot as a true freshman, split time with Daniels and Moss. And he held up well. He showed flashes, but he was not like this electrifying player. Last year, right before the season started, he suffers a Liz Frank fracture in his foot, and it kept him out for all but like maybe a couple drives of the season that he played at the end. I think he played a little bit of the Texas game and a little bit of the bowl game against USC. And so I think naturally you look at this third year and you say, hey, if there's a year for Reuben Owens to really show like, hey, I could be the starting running back in 2026 and I could be a stud and I could be a future draft pick, that would be this year. And no, he's not going to be the starter. No, he's not better than Moss right now. But if he's your third best running back and he's a five-star recruit and he's good enough to be your starter in 2026, that's your third best running back. And that's not even mentioning that you've got a guy like EJ Smith who's been around for a long time as your fourth best running back. And so it's not just the offensive line that has experience and continuity and all that. You also have this running back group that's led by a second team All SEC guy and then has a ton of guys with experience and production.
Yeah, this is one of the more talented running back rooms and experience wise with the continuity, one of the more high quality running back rooms in the entire country. Um, when you look at the receiving core and ultimately the passing game this year, in terms of like the stats from last year, the top few receivers depart, but you could probably make an argument that this receiving core could be better. They bring in a couple of intriguing transfers. Concepcion, I forgot how to pronounce his last name, from NC State, who was terrific there. And then Mario Craver from Mississippi State, who was very explosive, averaged over 21 yards per catch. And then you have a five-star sophomore there that's going to be maybe playing the wide receiver in the potentially like the Z spot here. So take me through this receiving core. Do you think that this could be one of the better receiving cores for the Aggies over the last handful of seasons?
Yes, it could be, but I'm not quite sold yet, and I'll tell you why. One, I think it's a different receiving core than they had last year. Last year, they didn't quite have the speed, but they had the size. They had 6'6" Noah Thomas, 6'4" Jade Walker, uh, and then they had Jabre Barber, who was kind of your smaller, quicker slot receiver. They had experience, but it was a lot of tall, go up and get it guys. This group is more like fast, speed, uh, but none of them are like over 6'1". You've got Jonah Wilson, who is like the only guy taller than like 6'1", but he's probably not going to be a player for you this year. And so what they're lacking is that go up and get it guy that, hey, it's 3rd and 10, and you got a guy one on one in the boundary, throw it up to him and make a 50-50 catch. Or, hey, you're in the red zone, throw it up to a guy. Noah Thomas was really good at that last year and was certainly a big loss for this group. But at the same time, Noah Thomas wasn't always healthy, wasn't always getting past the defensive backs, and wasn't always getting really open and really producing at a super high level. He got a lot of touchdowns, but he didn't get a lot of yards. And you really look at this position group for A&M, and it's been almost 10 years now since they've had like a 1,000-yard receiver, even like 800, 900-yard receiver. It's been a position of weakness for them. And I think Casey Concepcion is a guy they added who could be that guy for them. He's a guy who could be that draft pick. He could be that 800, 900 yard receiver. Um, and in that spring game, really impressed. Came down with some nice catches, and I think he's going to be somebody that Marcel Reed targets a whole bunch. He's going to be, I don't know if he's going to be the real burner, but he's going to be kind of the short and intermediate, catching a lot of passes and taking jet sweeps and things of that nature.
And most
Mario,
likely wide receiver one.
yeah, he's wide receiver one, no question about it in my mind. Mario Craver's the burner. Like he is short dude, 150 pounds. Uh, you know, might break if you touch him, but he will blow past everybody, right? And he's got some real speed that he displayed at Mississippi State. And sometimes you have these shorter guys with speed who can't get on the field, but he did get on the field last year at Mississippi State, and he can make contested catches and tough catches. He showed it in that spring game for A&M. He's the speed guy. And then I think there's a number of sophomores you could talk about, whether it's Terry Bussey, who was an immediate contributor for this team. But, was he quite comfortable at the receiver position? Was it something he was used to? I don't know. He initially came in as a defensive back. He had a hurt knee going into the season. And so I think the best is yet to come for Terry Bussey because I don't think he was quite comfortable in his role and joining the team late last summer and being hurt right away. Now with a healthy offseason and being at the wide receiver position for the full offseason, I think this is somebody who could really break out this year for this team. And then you've got the two other sophomores that are pretty impressive in practice this spring, which was Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel Roman. And so you probably have more options. The one other guy I'll mention is Jerome Miles. He's the incoming five-star recruit for receiver. Um, Coming off an ACL tear, it sounds like he's on the mend and back in the swing of things, but you never know. But he is the combination of everything you want: big receiver and fast. And so, like, he could be the complete package. It's just a matter of can he get back from his injury? And as a true freshman, you just never know how it translates. But you feel good about like 6 or 7 guys there, whereas last year you really only felt good about Noah Thomas, and you kind of felt good about a couple others, but not really. But this year, I think you've got more potential and you've got that much needed speed that they were missing. It's just, do they have that size? Will they be effective in the red zone? That sort of thing.
And the future seems very bright for this receiving core because there's going to be some young guys that could break through this year, but have a very bright future potentially ahead of them.
Exactly. Jerome Miles, I mean, remember the name because he may not be the guy this year, but next year, the year after, he's going to be a stud. And then Terry Bussey, he's only a true sophomore. Isaiah Williams, Ashton Bethel Roman, they're only true sophomores. So yeah, you've got a lot of options there that could be big time guys for you next year or even the year after.
Looking over to the Texas A&M defense. So the defensive line, I'm sure, like in most preview magazines, they're going to talk about some of the bigger names that they lost from last year's group. But I think this has a chance to be just about as good as last year. I mean, Cassius Howell returns a defensive end, the former Bowling Green breakthrough player from a couple years ago. And then there's some transfers coming in here for some reinforcements through the portal. Take me through this defensive line. Do you think this has an opportunity to match last year in terms of production?
Possibly. I think it's hard to quantify because I think you look at guys like Nick Scorton and Shamar Turner and Shamar Stewart last year, and they all had disappointing years production wise, but they still are, all top 100 picks in the draft for a reason. They're guys you have to game plan for. They are guys that even when they're not getting a sack or a tackle on a play, they affect the play. And so to lose all three of those guys, it's people will say, hey, look at the production, it'll be easy to replace. I still think it'll be pretty hard to replace those guys. But yeah, I think you can look at a number of guys and be excited about them. Number one being Cassius Howell, who had 4.5 sacks last year for this team as a backup. I mean, he was more productive than Shamar Stewart, who was top 15 pick in the draft. He was, not quite as productive as Nick Scorton, but like from a sack perspective, he was right around that same ballpark. Now, with Cassius Howell, the question is, he gets a lot of penalties. He's not the best against the run. So, what's he going to be like in that more featured role? Will he be exposed more, or are those things that he can clean up? Or could he just simply be that pass rusher specialist where, hey, if you have 10 sacks, doesn't really matter if you get a lot of penalties and aren't the best against the run because you have 10 sacks, you have 12 sacks, that kind of thing. You look at the rest of the defensive line. Albert Regis is a guy to mention just because he really broke out last year. He was kind of thought as a backup for a while. Would he always be a backup? But last year, he really proved himself as a starter. I don't know if he's going to be an all SEC talent this year, but I think he's a solid player to have up there in the middle. The guy right next to him is DJ Hicks. He's a former 5-star recruit entering his third year on campus. Hasn't really panned out just yet, but there's confidence among the coaching staff that like this is going to be kind of the year that he finally breaks through. And I think the struggle for him was getting acclimated, and you go from 5-star recruit to backup, and that's always a hard adjustment. Now that he'll probably be in a more featured role, I think he's, third year into it, going to be more effective. They brought in Tyler Onyedem, the transfer out of Iowa State. He's a bit of a tweener. You can put him a lot of different ways on the defensive line, but I think there's confidence that this guy could be a draft pick for the Aggies. He is very versatile and somebody that on third and long you could put a number of different spots. I think him and Hicks and Regis, they'll all kind of be considered starters, even though there's only two spots. And then just a couple more defensive ends. TJ Searcy, they brought in from Florida. He is somebody that, hasn't wowed you with the numbers, but he brings a lot of production and experience. And, coming into his third or fourth year here, he'll have to prove that he's a starting caliber guy for this defense, but I think he will. And is he going to get a ton of sacks? I don't know, but I think he'll just be a solid player, kind of like Albert Regis is. And then, you've got other guys. Ryland Kennedy comes back with experience. They brought in Dayan Hayes from the transfer portal out of Colorado. And then if I were to say the one wild card, the one sleeper that maybe the casual fan may not know about just yet is Marco Jones, the true freshman for this group. If there was one freshman All-American for A&M this coming season, it very well could be Marco Jones. He had 5 sacks in the spring game,
Wow.
which is kind of unbelievable. Like that, I call it the greatest spring game of all time. Like it's just he was all over the place. Now you have to give it an asterisk because hey, sacks are counted differently in spring games. You're not bringing the quarterback down. He was facing backup offensive linemen, walk-on offensive linemen. So of course he was gonna, be the one to win those matchups. But still, he was really all over the place, and it matched up with what we had heard all spring, which was, hey, get ready for this Marco Jones guy, because if he's a big time player for A&M this season, do not be shocked. And so there's a lot of guys to sort through, a lot of newcomers to sort through at the defensive line. That's why I'm a little out of breath. But Marco Jones, hey, this is somebody to remember because I don't know if it'll happen this year, but he is going to be a big time difference maker, I think, for this group.
So despite the lost production, some of those top names from last season, you don't think this defensive line is by any means like a concern, correct?
I think it is
Okay.
just because you lost three top 100 picks. You didn't, you kind of fell off a cliff at the end of last year defensively. And, you know, a lot of these guys are still not totally proven. Even Cassius Howell, really like him. I really think that he could have a good year, but he hasn't showed it as a starter yet. And he's got a couple deficiencies to his game that, you kind of question, okay, like is he going to be exposed against the run? Is he going to have some costly penalties and that sort of thing? So I think it's a concern in the sense of like, I'm just not sold it'll be a strength. Uh, but yeah, I don't know if it'll be a totally a glaring weakness either. So I guess it's good. It's in a decent place, but I just don't know if it's going to be a strength for this team.
Well, what could be a strength for the team and what will likely be a strength for the team is the linebacking core. I mean, PFS just came out with a list of top linebacker cores in college football, and Texas A&M was in the top five there. Obviously, York leads the group here. Scooby Williams has some experience, but take me through this room. Do you like the depth here as well? Because obviously the top end talent is there.
Yeah, I do like the depth, and I'll start with the starters. You got Torian York, who, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say other than he started right away as a true freshman. He's played every game. He's Mr. Durability, and he's kind of become the underappreciated player for this team. I felt like he maybe was a little overrated as a true freshman as far as overall impact, and then he kind of became underrated, where it was like, oh, like yeah, he probably will be a draft pick, and yeah, he isn't like as much of a liability as some might think, because there were times last year where, hey, he's a bigger, sturdier, compressed, I guess is what you'd call it, linebacker. He's not the sideline to sideline, Edgerrin Cooper type, if Aggie fans will remember. And he's not Mr. Athleticism, but he's got great instincts. He's a leader. He's a great tackler. He's a great run stopper. Uh, he brings everything mentally that you'd want in a linebacker. And then, talking about Scooby Williams, um, he was one of the biggest questions entering last year because he was just flat out not good at Florida. And when A&M picked him up, it was kind of like, really, Scooby Williams is going to be your starting will linebacker in 2024, and he shocked the world and was pretty dang good last year. Fourth on the team in tackles, fourth in tackles for loss, got an interception against Mississippi State, and really just did the little stuff really well for this group. And what we found out recently was he spent pretty much the entire year with a torn meniscus in his knee.
Wow.
He suffered it fifth defensive play of the year against Notre Dame, and he still was pretty good. And so he's entering his fifth season now for the Aggies. Um, those are two extremely experienced linebackers who could both be draft picks next year, or for York's case, the year after. So you feel great about that. Backups, Damian Sanford is your guy at will linebacker. Because Williams was 50-50 at times last year, Sanford saw the field a lot. I don't know if he is a superstar just yet, but as a backup, I think you feel really comfortable with him if he does have to see the field. And then at middle linebacker, it's probably Jordan Lockhart. I think it was a question going into the offseason. Who's the backup middle linebacker? Do they need to go in the portal there? But Lockhart, I think, in the spring and in the spring game, showed enough to where, hey, you feel good about this guy. He's a true sophomore or redshirt freshman. I think I don't think he redshirted. I think he's a true freshman. So, or sorry, true sophomore. So he still has a lot of football ahead of him. So hopefully he doesn't see the field this year because that would not be good if York went down. But if he did, I think A&M wouldn't be in the worst place. And I do think that in the future, he could be a nice option for this defense.
Looking towards the back end of the Aggie defense, so Will Lee returns at one of the corner spots. Des Ricks played significant snaps last year as a true freshman. Or was he a redshirt freshman last year?
Uh, Des Ricks was a redshirt freshman, yes.
Redshirt freshman. So yeah, take me through the secondary. It's a more experienced group this year than when it was last year. Do you think this room has, or do you think this defensive secondary has some room for growth?
They definitely have room for growth. Really struggled at certain stretches last year. You know, this defense had a lot of issues, tackling, run defense at times, uh, defending the pass. I mean, it was almost like, what issues do they not have? But the secondary, I think, is what irked Mike Elko the most. If you watch the post-game press conference in the Las Vegas Bowl, you could tell how much it irked him, this secondary. And I think having Will Lee back as your top cornerback, second team All SEC, this is a guy that could be an All American for you this year, if everything goes right. And so having that alone, I think, should help this group. Um, at the other side, it's still a question. I think for Des Ricks, he kind of got thrown into the fire. He was not ready yet to be a starting quarterback in the SEC. And I just don't think he had all the concepts down. It's hard to tell as just a guy watching the games in the press box. And they're not going to tell you what the exact problem is. But it just seemed like there were so many miscommunications, so many busted coverages. And that to me says that, hey, you don't know exactly where to do, what to do, where to go. But from like just a physical standpoint, Des Ricks is an impressive athlete. Uh, he's got the length, he's got the athleticism, he's got all the traits. So for me, I think if he can just get the scheme down and uh, you know the mental aspect of the game down, and having another year of experience, not being as green going into last compared to going into last year. Um, he could. I'm not giving up on Des Ricks yet. I think it was a bad season for him last year, but he has all the traits. He just has to get the scheme down. They brought in Julian Humphrey from Georgia. Um, he's another where he was good enough to start last year for Georgia, but he lost the starting job uh, kind of toward the end of the season. And a lot of it was because he struggled to make plays on the ball. He struggled to turn his head around. Ball would be in the air and he'd get a PI, or a guy would grab it right over him. If you remember that iconic Ryan Williams play that was on every highlight reel for weeks, that was against Julian Humphrey. And so, like, again, he was good enough to start at Georgia in his second year in college, but he has some deficiencies to his game. So um, I think what I should mention as well is just Tyreek Chappelle being back for this group. I think is going to do wonders for this defense. You could have argued that he would have been the best player on the defense last year, or second best, or top three at least. Went down with a significant injury after the first or the second game during practice, and missed the whole season. This will be his fifth year in college. I You could put him at nickel, you could put him at corner. It'll be interesting to see what A&M does, because they did bring Jordan Shaw as well from Washington, who started at nickel at Washington and Indiana. He could play outside, but probably more of a nickel. So you have some options. You could start Chappelle at nickel and keep Shaw as a backup, maybe rotate, maybe, hey, we're going to go to a dime package and we're going to bring an extra DB in and it's going to be Jordan Shaw. Or you could say, hey, Tyreek Chappelle, You go back to corner, which you played for the first 2 seasons, outside corner, and we'll put Jordan Shaw at nickel. So they have a lot more options. Whereas last season, Tyreek Chappelle goes down, and it's like, crap, what do we do? And then just to wrap up safety, uh, they've got 3 guys there with significant experience that came back: Bryce Anderson, Marcus Ratcliffe, and Dalton Brooks. Really struggled last year. Bad group last year. Uh, Missed a ton of tackles. Not great in coverage. Uh, but really, the missed tackles was the biggest thing. But I think there's optimism with Bryce Anderson because his first 2 years were at nickel. He was thought to be out of position, moved him to safety last year, and really early in the season, he suffers a significant ACL or AC joint sprain in his shoulder. And you have a bad shoulder, you can't tackle. Like you can't wrap up, you can't move, you can't, do all that kind of stuff. Go to the ground. And so it's no wonder that he struggled at times. But I think him being fully healthy, fourth year, second year in the system, if there's ever a year for him to figure it out, it'd be this year. I think Marcus Ratcliffe still has a lot to develop. He was a true sophomore, first year at A&M last year, San Diego State transfer, and it was a lot for him. And I think that he's got to improve. And then Dalton Brooks, just to wrap it up, really impressive athlete, had a lot of issues with targeting penalties last year, but definitely shows you something. I mean, he's got some pop to him. He's got some athleticism, and if he puts it together, I think he could be a good player.
So, Carter, if Texas A&M has a breakthrough season this coming fall, it's going to be because of blank.
Yeah, I got to give you multiple things, so I'm going to cheat a little bit here, but I feel like number one has to be injuries at this point. Like if they're healthy, because if you look at the last handful of years, or I guess last ever since the COVID season, which they had incredible health that year. It seemed like everyone was healthy. Ever since then, their starting quarterback has gotten hurt every single year. Like that's pretty crazy to think about. 21, 22, 23, 24.
Yeah. Wow.
Every single year their starting quarterback has gotten hurt and their backups have gotten hurt. And you've got Levy, like you look at last year, even in the first game, Le'Veon Moss got hurt. Uh, or sorry, not Le'Veon Moss. Connor Wigman got hurt with his shoulder injury. Then you had Scooby Williams who got hurt with his torn meniscus. Dalton Brooks got ejected for a targeting penalty. Mark Naboo, the starting center, went down for the season, and that was all just in the first game. And so I think this team needs some good luck, and that comes with injuries. But just beyond that, actual football stuff. I think if Marcel Reed can take that next step as a quarterback. Um, Look, we know the running game's going to be there. We know the offensive line's going to be there, but the passing game is Marcel Reed. Someone who's capable of throwing 300 yards consistently. He may not need to, but can he do it? And can he continue to take care of the football and really be more than just like a game manager plus kind of guy? Can he actually win a game? And you could say, hey, he already did that at Florida. He already did that at USC, even though it ended up a loss. He took them to the game-winning drive and did enough to win. But can he do it through a whole season, and can he do it against really good teams is kind of the question. So if he takes that next step, like A&M thinks he's capable of making, so injuries, Reed, and then the third thing I'll just say, you know, defensively, you could pick a number of things. The run defense has got to get better. The tackling's got to get better. Secondary's got to get better. So I'll just say I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. The defense has to be a totally different defense this year. Like it cannot be one where you're wondering wow, that was a really stupid penalty on Shamar Turner, or oh man, Nick Scorton hasn't had a sack in 5 games. Shamar Stewart only has 1.5 sacks. Oh man, another busted coverage. Oh man, another busted coverage. Limiting the mistakes, limiting the miscues, and getting the most out of this group. It just felt like they underachieved so much last year and really failed in a lot of different ways. And so to boil it all down, the too long didn't read version, I'm going to go Marcel Reed takes a jump, you get some injury luck, and the defense is not a train wreck, or at least just you get the most out of the defense. How about that? So those are the three things I would say.
Well, the defense is going to be tested right out of the gates. UTSA, Notre Dame, and Auburn all in the month of September. I mean, obviously, I know UTSA from an athleticism standpoint is not Notre Dame or Auburn, but those are three quality offenses, and so they're going to be tested right away to start the season. So we'll see what the defense is made of early on this coming fall for the Aggies. Well, Carter, really good job previewing the 2025 Aggies for us on the channel today. We really appreciate you joining us today. And so, Carter, one last time for our viewers and subscribers, please tell them where they can find your content.
Gig'em247.com and at Carter Carls on X is where you can find me and all my bad tweets. So, yeah, those are the two places. And I also have the Gig'em 24/7 podcast that we do on YouTube and on Apple as well.
Yeah.